Okay, in today's episode, I want to start with a shout out and celebration of bravery from someone in our community. And this week, I want to feature Tika Aziz. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Okay, she is a personal development coach, and she just ran her first co-working session for fellow coaches and entrepreneurs. She's the whole thing got off to an amazing start, and I want to help celebrate that she did the brave thing. And she's going to be running those monthly. So if you're looking for co-working connection and support, I'd strongly recommend checking out Tika and her profile over on Instagram. It is at Writosaurus. So that's WRITEOSAURUS. No underscores or anything. And yeah, go and find her, check her out. She's just doing some amazing things in the personal development space at the moment. And I love that she's got this co-working session for people to just connect. I've come late to the idea of co-working. I was a little too independent, but now I actually really love the connection and networking and stuff that can happen through co-working as well. So love that. Okay. If you would like to be featured on the Business Bravery podcast in one of these little shout outs, come and join the Facebook group, the Business Bravery with Tiff Facebook group. That is the best place to get noticed. Or also keep an eye out in my Instagram stories. There's a whole form now and a whole process you can go through to do this. It's, very simple, 4 little questions, very simple. And yeah, I'm your host, Tiffany Gilliland, an Australian business and mindset coach with 10 years' experience in online marketing and the creator of the Business Bravery Framework. I help coaches like you to be brave so you can stop dreaming and start doing that next big brave step and finally make more impact and get more clients. From speaking on camera to selling to launching, my approach to bravery helps you take bigger leaps without the mindset spirals. It's the secret ingredient to bigger results. In today's episode, I want to talk about self-sabotage and how to spot it. So, what does self-sabotage look like? And especially when it seems reasonable, like this is when it's always a toss-up for me. It's like, when is it self-care? When is it, when is it actually, hey, this other thing needs to take priority? And when is it a situation of, okay, right, actually, this like I have this big dream, but actually I am not taking the actions I need to. Like maybe you're getting stuck in procrastination, you're getting stuck in overwhelm or uncertainty. But sometimes like the procrastination doesn't seem like procrastination because you're actually doing other things, other priorities, but they're not the things that are going to get you the new clients, or they're not the things like it can be. I know some people call it the busy work. I'm not a fan of that. I think, especially if you are someone like me, where it's like, but all of this work has to get done, and then it can be a case of, so it's like working out, okay, what are the needle movers? What are the 20% of tasks that really move the needle and get things moving? And then, and then are those happening and that kind of thing. And so I guess like more of a concrete example, it's sort of, and I'm going to be going through an example in this episode. So it's the situations where it's like, okay, I know I want to get 2 new clients, for example. This is what I'm going to talk about later. And then you're in that situation where it's like, okay, so I've decided that to do that, I'm going to be promoting about my coaching 2 to 3 times on social media, Instagram, whatever. And then you find that for a variety of reasons that doesn't happen. And then it's kind of like, but for good reasons. It's like something came up from a client, this thing happened, that thing happened. And then that's where it's like we need to look into, okay, perhaps some self-sabotage is happening here. And another example of this actually that it's not in my notes, but I'm just talking from from my brain, where everybody talks from, Tiffany. Yes, we're good. Uh, so my last solo episode, which is episode 46. So I was actually, while I was talking out my lessons learned from quarter one, I actually realized some of my own self-sabotage in that when I go into doing some of these launches and things, and I did Bravery Month, and for some reason, because it was a whole month, my brain interpreted that of, oh, we're going to have to work harder. It's a whole month. And so I was trying to do like 1,000% effort, which burnt me out mid-month, and I kind of collapsed in a heap and yeah, pulled back from the whole launch. So yeah, and that's something that like it seems reasonable, you know. Oh, we're launching for a month. I don't have a 10 people to help me, so I've got to show up like I've got 10 people here in my head, in my body, all making all of that effort. That, I mean, when I say it out loud, it's not reasonable, but when it's in your head and it's a long-standing repeating pattern, it can seem very reasonable. And these are the patterns that we sometimes don't see. And so I'm going to be sharing some of my own like past experiences, and then how like my business bravery framework and the whole vision boarding process and everything that I do helps break this down and helps us to see these repeating patterns, these negative thoughts, or just thoughts that don't serve us or don't help us as much. They don't even have to be negative. You know, like, and sometimes the thought of, oh, hey, I'm launching for a whole month, I'm going to have to work a bit harder. For some people, that can be a really helpful thought. For someone like me, and understanding that I kind of working hard's kind of already a switch that's on for me naturally. It's like I was saying, it's like I've got to learn to perhaps work a little less and work smarter rather than harder. And what does that look like? And how does that look? So yeah, it's just this whole process that I have helps to uncover these repeating patterns so that perhaps you can take some intervention and do reframes and choose thoughts and beliefs that serve you going forward, so that you're not just acting from a place of how would you say it, just like not thinking things through, like kind of on autopilot. And like out of autopilot, we just go to these well-worn thoughts that we've always thought in these situations of like, oh, I've got something big in my business, I'm going to have to work harder, except I already work hard. So yeah, so then me working harder, it's just there's only so much energy in a body. And yeah, so it's just interesting. And then like some other things that you might be thinking, like some of mine in the past, and I'll talk about this a bit more, is some things like the urgent work. It's like, oh, you know, clients need to be looked after first. For example, client work, especially when I was in a service-based business, but also when I was coaching, it's like client stuff has to be worked out first, and then I'll get to my work. But then I found that the client work, because it was facing somebody else, and so I didn't want to let them down. And it was just easier to then fill up the day with stuff for them, because I was always seeing myself and my success through the lens of what other people saw me as. So then the things that were important to me, things like perhaps launching a podcast, or, you know, things that are like weren't connected to like a client or somebody necessarily judging me or something like that, like, which can be the creating the content and things like that, because it wasn't as directly related to gaining clients at that time. Even, you know, just like those things that are important, even things like creating a new course or like an online course or a program to help people, that stuff's not tied to clients yet. So like in order to get myself to do those things, I used to have to sort of tell people about them beforehand, pre-sell them beforehand. I mean, pre-selling is still a good move, but it's like I had to do that to get me to take action. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as big a priority. Anyway, I am going off on a tangent. Let's get back on to what we're talking about. Okay. So it's just, I'm going to be diving more into this self-sabotage and what, like, when it just seems completely reasonable, but it's actually taking you away from your goals. Okay. So this episode will be useful for you if you are struggling with consistency in any area. Okay. If you also, like me, have big dreams, or you've done any of the Bravery Board masterclasses and you have found yourself like doing the whole, setting brave goals, which are different to SMART goals, and you're, shooting for the moon, landing on the stars, and yet then when it comes time to take action, that action taking isn't happening. And you notice that it's not happening because you're not getting closer to your goals. Okay. So uh, you might be holding back on taking some of the bigger actions in your business, like actually, telling people about your coaching, creating content, actually going live and doing videos, and or things like, running the masterclass or even launching the podcast, right? And it's also useful for you if you're struggling to focus on any and all tasks that would likely get you the business that you want. Like if you find yourself putting off doing the sales page, for example, if that's your thing, or sending the emails, or actually recording the podcast episode, or yeah, doing the posts that are going to get you the clients, right? So also, if you've ever experienced thoughts or feelings of not being enough, not doing enough, not being worthy of success, even fear of failure can be another one. Some of that stuff, if you're aware of it, the other stuff you might, like the stuff you might not be aware of, can be driving this kind of self-sabotage. So key takeaways for today will be spotting the sneaky sabotages that seem reasonable but are actually holding you back. And I know I've talked about this before, and it's going to be something I talk about a lot because it's really at the heart of what I do at this point in time, at least, because it's what I'm working on. But I am going to be talking about it through the lens of different examples from my past, and how I've moved through it, and then even, how I use the whole Bravery Board Vision Boarding process and this whole business bravery framework as part of this whole thing. So it's also going to some key takeaways for today is also like reframing some negative thinking so that you can actually take bolder, braver action in your coaching business. And I will be actually explaining a little bit more about brave goals and why I prefer them over SMART goals. At least that is in my notes at this point in time. And now I'm thinking, did I put that in the notes for the rest of the podcast? We will see. If I don't cover that, then I'll be covering that at the end. So I'll also be talking about this whole Bravery Board vision boarding. It's a visioning and planning process. So I know, like, talking about vision boards, I think makes more sense in December when a lot of people do vision boards for the year ahead and then maybe don't revisit them, that kind of thing. I'm a weird person in that my vision boards change up from quarter to quarter because I put in the goals and my new thoughts for the quarter ahead as part of that planning process. However, there is a part of the overall framework which includes doing check-ins and things like that. And that's where the lessons learned and that check-in process and all that is part of this whole process. But first up, we need a plan with some goals and a plan and some systems and all of that stuff. So if you are wondering about this whole Bravery Board vision boarding planning process, I'm going to be teaching the next round of classes in June. It's going to be in the last week of June, in like the 24th, 25th, and 26th in US time zone. It will be other dates in, say, Australia here, the 25th, 26th, 27th here in Australia, and different in some other places. So I'll be teaching that whole process over 3 days for like 3 lots of 30-minute classes. That is the plan. I will tell you more about that as we go through this. I don't want to hold up this episode by telling you too much at this point because it won't make as much sense until I tell you more. So let's paint a picture of self-sabotage. So for anyone who isn't aware, I guess self-sabotage can look different for different people. Of course it is. We're all different, unique snowflakes. But there's probably going to be some things that you recognize and some things that can cross over. And then sometimes there can be somewhat of a fine line between self-care and self-sabotage sometimes. So this process that we do when, we set brave goals and we do these really big brave goals, we shoot for the moon, we land on the stars. We don't beat ourselves up for not landing on the moon the first time round, but part of that process helps unearth some of these negative thoughts and objections in our brain about why this won't work, why we personally can't do it. Okay. Oftentimes, definitely in my past, I could see all of my clients and everyone else I came in contact with, I could see all of their amazing futures and what they could create, and nothing could hold them back. But for me, for the longest time, there was just something in my belief set that just thought that for me, it was always, I was going to have to work harder to make it happen. Or, and then any kind of negative feedback, my reticular activating system in my brain would just translate as that as yet another reason why it probably wouldn't work for me. I probably couldn't build the business of my dreams. Anytime someone said no, anytime somebody said, oh, that's not for me, like, gosh, it seems, I don't know, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it seems very different saying it out now loud now. But these were things like, this was my go-to self-sabotaging thing, right? It's like my brain was trying to prove my belief that I wasn't good enough, there was something lacking in me, and so it would find the evidence to support that, and then that meant I would go out and I wouldn't connect with people, I wouldn't show up as passionate or as confident, and it was just this weird thing that I had to work out, that sort of like the belief had to come first. And yes, anyway, trying not to go on a tangent again, I have these dot points. So this is all to sort of say that in like painting a picture of self-sabotage, some of my favorite go-to thoughts, yours might be a bit different, but some of my favorite go-to thoughts where my brain wants to automatically go when I'm not being intentional with looking at my brain and looking at situations that I'll be in and coming up with some new intentional thoughts and working on them ahead of time, is things like no one cares, they won't want this, they won't want it from you, or they won't want it from me, right? Other times it can be things like, I don't have time for that, I can't do that right now, I'm not ready yet. So, and this will become more apparent when I get into the example, so I won't get into the point too deeply here. I was going to say I won't belabor the point, then I'm like, oh no, let's anyway. So the other ways that self-sabotage, it can look like doing all of the other things instead of the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And if you're anything like I used to be, it'd be very easy to find a different work task. Like, so I don't know, it was a bit like at university, right? And just or even at school, right? You have a test coming up and you're supposed to study for the test. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, it's like, now is the time to deep clean out my closet, right? And I don't mean that in a metaphorical sense. I mean that in the literal sense of like pulling out clothes and, cleaning it down and all of that kind of thing, just because that seemed like a much better version of things to do than study, right? Especially for someone like me, I really do prefer active stuff and doing things with my body and physical and things like that at times. So as opposed to sitting down with more of the mental stuff, like I like that too, but it just, after a while, like there was so much I didn't know about myself. But then like, as you learn from that mistake and go, actually, you know what, it might have been helpful had I not made that choice, then all of a sudden these things become off limits and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to clean the house when I'm supposed to be writing content for my business. But you know what? I can check my emails quickly and then deal with my emails. That has to be done now. And yet maybe it doesn't, right? And so sometimes sabotage can look like that. Sometimes it can look like just trying to do all the things at once. Like it can be a lot of energy and in some ways like chaotic, but sometimes chaotic feels good, especially if that's what you always go to in times of stress. And so let's like you're juggling all the things, maybe you're switching between tasks, trying to multitask if you believe that if that's your thing, right? Hang on, I'm just going to take a drink. And so, yeah, it's just like I see this a lot with clients of mine, especially when they want to run a masterclass. All of a sudden, they're taking on extra client work. They've taken on an extra side gig of income, right? They've said yes to all these things. And I've done this too, right? I'm not immune to these things. And yeah, and so sometimes it's just like, oh my gosh, I've said yes to all these other things and I really want to do this other thing, but I don't have time. So it's not my fault, it's that I don't have time. And yet actually there were decisions that were made that meant that the time or that the priorities weren't happening. So some other recent self-sabotage I've had is like it's not enough. It's embarrassing, especially like the numbers are embarrassing. I'm too tired. So if you go back and look at episodes 40 and 46, there's some stuff from my past if that's of any interest, if you want to dive into this from different perspectives. But yeah, just so you know, this is not a case of me showing up as the person who's like, okay, I've dealt with this and it's never going to happen to me again. Like that is just, it's not how human brains work. Because to grow a business, you need to work outside of your comfort zone. When you're working outside of your comfort zone, that often triggers things in your subconscious. Okay. It starts worrying. It starts to like, it starts to look at things like the negative comment you might get on a video or a potential client saying no. It translates that in your body the same as if a tiger is coming out to eat you. So then the brain wants to protect you. So even though you've gone through this and you've dealt with some of your thoughts and you've reframed them, this is something that will come up again when you try and do the next thing outside of your comfort zone because this is like hardwired. The good thing about having something like this framework where we go through and we look at the thoughts and then we reframe them and we do that while we're planning so we can plan ahead so we can take more action and then we have the check-in system so that we can keep taking action and keep staying on track is that we can move through it faster and it becomes easier and we can train our brains into different default thoughts instead of the I'm not enough or I've got to work at 1,000% in a launch. And if you're wondering what that refers to, check out episode 46. And, as opposed to just going to those on default, we can go to new thoughts on default. And over time, it gets easier. But my understanding is you never get to a point. I mean, especially like unless you stop building your business and stepping outside of your comfort zone, which even then, even if you stay in your comfort zone, if you're somebody who's even tried entrepreneurship, you're definitely the kind of person who's going to get bored at some point staying in your comfort zone. So then we get triggered to want to go outside of our comfort zone because we're bored. We're looking for a new challenge or something to interest us. And so then we get to a certain part outside of our comfort zone and then it all gets triggered and then we have to go through this again. This is why we need these systems and this is why like the most amazing marketing strategies and the most amazing marketing team in the world can't fix all of these things if the people in them aren't managing their mind, aren't aware of these things that cause the self-sabotage. Okay. So I've said some of the ones that have come up for me, but everyone has their own ways of seeing this play out. And if you start tracking it, you're going to start to see some of your own ways like that things are repeating. Okay, so this is the value of tracking your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and reframing to see the patterns. So, some other ones that might come up of it's too hard, I'm not clear, I'm waiting on a download from the universe, but that download of like answers never comes because you're too anxious or jittery to take it in, especially if you're doing all the things and you don't have time. Yeah, the I don't have time. One of my favorite ones that I was in for a very long time was I'm behind, I'm always behind. So I don't have, that's one that I've worked through and doesn't come up anymore. And like if it does come up, I spot it within half an hour and go, oh, I know what's going on here, right? But that's how I used to start my day of I'm behind. So then I used to create a day where I was always behind because I had these big ambitious plans that I could never keep up with. And yes, anyway, it's a whole thing. So a little bit of just some context around this because like I've talked about setting goals and all that stuff, and I teach you all about the goals and like setting goals where we shoot for the moon, land on the stars, and the process of checking in on those goals of just like did I follow through, did I put in 80% effort towards this goal, and then setting up plans and systems to make the goal happen, and then looking at the thoughts because we're shooting so big it does trigger thoughts and feelings to come up, and we can reframe the thoughts and then choose thoughts that actually serve us. That whole process I teach in the Bravery Board Masterclasses, which is coming up at the end of June. And I'll be running that in the Facebook group. So I need you to know, though, that this whole process that I've created, especially with the goal setting part, I'm not a natural goal setter, okay? I need you to know that I'm not someone who ever thought too much about setting goals. And I didn't enjoy setting goals because the way I was taught about goals, like SMART goals, which I absolutely hate, like that whole achievable thing is boring to me, right? I like big visions and big leaps. Even if the leaps don't happen the way I think they're going to, I like shooting for that big leap, okay? And because for me, that's fun. It's it's a challenge. I enjoy that. The way that goals were taught to me, I just, it's like, oh, I was taught them at university too. And it was like, oh, do what you did last year and add 10%. It's like, okay, so I don't know, so I'm pretty much doing the same thing that I've always done, as opposed to, I really like some of my mentors who talk about setting big goals and the idea being that, okay, actually, by setting big goals, this means you need to think more creatively and you might see solutions that you didn't see before. And like that totally gets me lit up. Love that. So I've adopted this process that I teach because number one, I've tried everything else, right? I haven't achieved my big goals yet. Like I said, I've working with coaches and I have mentors and people who encourage this big thinking. And those are people in my life who have actually achieved much bigger goals than I have, right? So, like I said, that whole it all lights me up to move forward, being excited, and it's fun. And then yeah, and then as I said, number four is like seeing the people I look up to, they repeatedly talk about going through these processes and they are achieving their goals. Okay. And from my own past, I didn't like setting goals because part of me just wants to rebel against them immediately. But I did find like I did like setting systems and routines. I really like that. And I know that doesn't work for one-off projects, but I like just putting things into, hey, I'm going to do this on Tuesdays, I'm going to do that on Thursdays. It really helps me not to have to think or overthink and overanalyze and be anxious about what am I going to do? When am I going to get that done? And worry about am I going to remember to do that at a certain time? So especially like that's why I like things on some certain amount of routine. So what I found though with the systems and routines was that without the goals, I didn't have that measuring stick for making decisions. So it's like when I have a goal, it makes it easier to make decisions. It's like, oh, if somebody had told me that earlier, it's like, oh, okay, now I get what these goals are for. Because previously I just thought goals were to be set. You feel good about them for the first couple of weeks of the year, then you forget about them. And then at the end of the year, you look back and go, oh man, here's some of the stuff I did, but I completely didn't do that. And also because the whole checking in on goals, I used to beat myself up over it if I wasn't doing well. As I've said before, I have some perfectionistic tendencies and have done in the past. And so you can imagine that goal setting doesn't work really well as a perfectionist, because it's like if you're a little bit off, you've had a bad day, like it just nothing in my brain allowed for that. And nobody who taught goal setting systems ever talked about, oh, what if your hormones aren't good? What if you've got chronic pain? What if you're having a bad day? So I just sort of thought, oh yeah, goals are for me. Until this is part of why I've created this system though, so that I can actually do this as part of the goal setting, and the whole going through the thoughts and the reframing, that kind of thing. That's all stuff that I have done for years, but I never brought it into my planning systems until the last 6 months or so. And that's changing everything, because it's like, oh, I've got a plan moving forward and I've got a plan for when that comes up. And I don't think I've seen anybody teaching it, like doing that kind of thought reframing, thought work at the time of like planning out your big goals for your business and doing that every 3 months and just, doing those plans. So that's some of the context about how this process came about. So what exactly is the process? Okay. I want to come back. I'm going to change this around because I think that it will be more interesting. So let's get into all right, let's get into the self-sabotage and see if I can talk about this bravery board process with an example with self-sabotage. Let's see if I can do this on the fly. All right. So let's say one of your big brave goals is to sign 2 new clients this month, right? So we're going to I know I talked about this at the beginning of the episode. I'm getting into more of the details now. So what we do in the business bravery framework, so before we set the goal, we do some meditation and visualization in order to connect with our future self and to really feel it and to help kind of manifest what we want to happen from our future. And we do some identity shifting, and then we get into the brave goals, right? So then at this point, when we're setting the brave goals, say it's to sign 2 new clients for this month, then the next step is to create like a plan and kind of a system. All right, how am I going to make that happen? Okay, what am I going to test first? Because there are many different ways to create 2 new clients for the month. So say, for example, we have then chosen, or perhaps you as the participant has chosen to plan. And it's like, okay, so the plan's going to be, I'm going to post a work with me post 2 to 3 times per week on social media. And I'm going to have 3 conversations with people per day in the DMs. Okay. So it's like, all right, awesome. You feel great. You're a planner person. Your planner identity is on fire. And it feels like a done deal in your head. You can visualize it. You can maybe feel it happening. And then, so this is where usually, right, we then come into, all right, it's Monday. It's 9 a.m. I put it on my calendar. If you're a calendar planner person, I am. You might not be. You might have it on a to-do list. I do both. So, but it comes to 9 a.m. and that's when you plan to write the content, right? You're like, cool, I'm going to write these work with me posts. And then for some reason, you just do a quick check of your emails and you find an urgent email from a client. They need help. You have to answer. You've got to do that now, right? So now it's 9:15, although in all honesty, for me, it'd probably be 9:30 by this point, as I thought and rethought and overthought the whole answer to the question. Right. So, but let's assume you're not necessarily where I was, and it's a 9:15, and you load up your blank document. You might be in Google Docs, you might be in Word, you might be in whatever the Apple version of that stuff is, and you see the cursor blinking, and it mocks you as your mind stays completely blank, right? You know what? All of a sudden you're like, okay, you know what? It's time to find some content inspiration. I'm going to go over to Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, whichever your preferred option, maybe TikTok, Pinterest, whatever. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go get some content inspiration, right? And then you get in my case, into Instagram, and it's like, oh wait, hang on, there are DMs. I better answer those. So now, like, you're answering email, like answering DMs and getting into that space. Suddenly it's 10:30 a.m. and it's time for client calls, right? It's like, oh, okay. And then you can kind of see, like, just from these small decisions, and this keeps happening throughout the day, and then Monday is gone, right? And then all of a sudden the week flies by and it's Friday, and it's time for checking in. Now, if you have the business bravery framework, you have a whole check-in system that, is the basis, and you can tweak it to suit you and all of that good stuff, right? So say this is what you go through. If, like me in the past, I didn't even have that system because I hadn't created it yet. And so it could be a case of just going, oh man, I've been so slack, I didn't get that done. I definitely got to get it done next week, right? And so sometimes that's how it continues. But say you have check-in time, and this is now where the value of the business bravery framework comes in during the check-ins, because we can actually look at, okay, we can get curious. Oh, we can ask ourselves, why didn't that happen? And we can write that out in a journal. You can, come have a coaching session with me if that's what you're doing, or you can come into the Facebook group and just go, hey, here's what I've got going on. And then you can look at, all right, here's what thoughts are happening, right? I'm too busy to create content, right? And then we can even go deeper. It's like, oh, but what if it's not good enough? One of my favorite ones I used to have. What if nobody buys? What if too many people buy? What if I don't have the right niche anyway? Nobody will want this. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So then say we take one of those thoughts and we go, okay, I'm too busy to create content. That looks like one that looks pretty important to maybe take care of and maybe reframe, right? So then then it's like, oh, okay, so if say content creates clients, then what I'm really saying is I'm too busy to create clients. Now, that's something that needs to be addressed, right? And this is how that self-sabotage can just keep going on if you don't have this process and learn these skills of being able to, like, look at your thoughts, question them, and just be curious and treat yourself with kindness when these things come up, right? Because, like I said, we all have human brains. It's trying to keep us safe, and it will create these situations to help keep us safe at times, right? So now, when we're looking at this, okay, if content creates clients, then what we're really saying is I'm too busy to create clients. So then what if it was possible to have enough time to create clients? What if we stepped into the realm of possibility? It's like, oh, okay, so now if it was possible to have enough time to create clients, what would I think and feel and do differently? How can we reframe that thinking to, it's possible that I have enough time to create clients, enough time to create content, and therefore enough time to create clients, right? It's possible that I can create this content, right? So how can we reframe that thinking into that it's possible statement? And then all right, what plan would we create if we believed that it was possible that we had the time? What plan would we create? Okay, and then we would create a new plan. And I apologize, and I'm switching between I and we, but you need to know that this is coming directly from me. Like, I've done all of this, right? Both sides, the going through the thoughts and that whole thing of I need to create content. Like, now I really enjoy creating content. And, if it's on my calendar, I can sit down and do it without too much of a problem. But I had to create myself a system that worked for me. And so part of this whole thing with the reframe, and then, all right, so if I believe that it was possible for me to create content, that it's easy to create content for me, then, I create a new plan and it's like, oh, let's add in a fun brainstorming session because, I got stuck on that blank page. All right, so now let's do a brainstorming session of 10 different ways to tell people about my coaching offer. And then like that can solve the blank page situation. There's also some steps as well where it's like, okay, when I get stuck on something like this, it's like, okay, what happens if I then break it down into smaller steps? So that it's like sometimes I have to do this, I have to pull the journal out. And for some tasks, like doing my editing for the podcast and for things and like bookkeeping, right? The things that are just like, it's like nails on a chalkboard, like just like razor blades on the skin. I don't know, that's a very graphic thing. I need to come up with something else for nails on a chalkboard. I might put that in my stories. Anyway, so just because do people even know what chalkboards are anymore? So even they wouldn't even know that sound. So then but yes, it's just like it just feels wrong in your brain. So in order to get through this, I pull out the journal and it's like I journal out like every small step. Like I'm going to turn on the computer, then I'm going to open this page, this app, or then I'm going to find this file. I'm going to do this and that. Just give your brain every small step so that it can feel like it's already done and feel better about taking action. And it's like you can just focus on each small step one at a time and you can cover them up if you need to. So it's just like you're just reading one step and not reading all 100 steps of the process, which can be overwhelming to some of our brains. Okay. So now in the check-in system, we have maybe a new plan. We have the new plan with the brainstorming session. We have some new thoughts, right? Some reframes of like, oh, it's possible that I can create content, and some new actions moving forward. So some other actions could be like, hey, I'm just going to set a 10-minute timer and write a post. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to trust myself to write the right words. And then we see how we're going at the next check-in. So this is part of that process. So this is why I teach it in terms of planning, but as you can see, the value comes in using that whole system when we go into the check-in system. Of course, we're not doing a whole new like vision board with all the pictures and all that kind of stuff like we do in the planning session. And like when we do the planning in June, we're planning out the whole next quarter. So July, August, and September. Or depending on when you're listening to this, I think you can get what's happening. It's like the last week of the last quarter, I'm running classes, and then we plan out the next quarter together. So that is what we do. But then the rest of it is like doing the check-ins and using those tools as part of the check-ins. So because it's the same tools that we use when we're planning, this whole thoughts and reframes and everything. But really, like even like it's not like doing the thoughts and the reframes at time of planning. It helps, but my experience has been that my brain finds new ones. So that's why you need to be on top of it with the weekly check-ins, the monthly and the quarterly. Although I'd love to hear back from people if that's not their situation, then I would love to know how that works because that's not how my brain goes because it finds new ones. But it does help to take more action of like having a plan going forward, because otherwise you can just get stuck in total self-sabotage and the procrastination. And I think in that story that I talked about is like, with the cursor blinking, like, that's where, that procrastination has led to like overwhelm. And then like probably I should have added in something where it's like, you go to start writing, but then you're kind of not sure, or you've written a post, but you don't post it. And that would be the uncertainty side. And sometimes these can work together. Other times you get one more than the other. But I found that the three seem to work in this nice little need a metaphor. Like it's kind of like this, you know, like in concert together sometimes, and like sometimes one takes the lead more than the other, but they kind of all seem to kind of go together a lot of the time. So why is this process, the whole business bravery process, important? And it highlights and breaks through the repeating patterns holding you back. Okay. It has you taking action, especially, like I said, a lot of people talk mindset and thought work. Nobody teaches about actually doing this at the time of planning out your your quarter going forward, so that you can take more action. Right? I know I said stuff still comes up, but even if you skip that step of the planning, like it would still come up anyway. The working through the negative thoughts or the unhelpful thoughts or the thoughts that don't serve you at the time of planning out your quarter, and then during the weekly check-ins, you're then planning out the next week. So you're going through that process again for the next week, right? Like I said, it's this thing. And by having these check-ins and everything, it just like it highlights and breaks through the repeating patterns holding you back. It has you taking more action because you can give your brain evidence, right? Especially from the check-ins. Part of the check-ins is tracking your numbers and things. So rather than just thinking, oh, I didn't do much of that, or I didn't, you know, oh, nobody really looked at my post this week, like the amount of times my brain's gone, oh yeah, nobody's reading your posts, but actually when you look at the actual data, there's a lot of people who are liking the post. They're maybe just not commenting, and actually that all can count and can be evidence for your brain that actually what you're doing is working, right? My brain loves to tell me that it's not working, even though all evidence says that it is. So that's a fun one. Something I've definitely found from this process is that it reduces stress and anxiety because you get to face things head on instead of avoiding them. So in that situation where I talked about, you know, the content and the blank page and all of that stuff, before I had this process, that's something that I could let go on for weeks sometimes. And in the case of things like the numbers in my business and the bookkeeping, that stuff that could go on for months. And then it just becomes bigger in your head because you're not facing what's going on. And this process of being brave and this framework that I have helps you to face this, and it can help reduce the stress and the anxiety. It's so, yes, amazing, awesome outcomes on that side of things. So, um, what you can find is that you can actually be failing ahead of time because you're avoiding the thing that you need to be doing. And so rather than taking some action and maybe failing because you didn't get it right, by not starting it at all, you're actually failing ahead of time, and you're feeling all of the horribleness, like all of the guilt, all of the stress, the anxiety, maybe even some shame by not tackling these things in your business, like the content, like the bookkeeping, uh, like, you know, going live or doing the masterclass or finally launching your course or launching the podcast, right? You can be, you know, making yourself feel bad. And then like it can just be torture in your head because it just builds up and it gets bigger and bigger. And that's where this process just helps break that down. Even though it seems reasonable, it's like, oh, I need to focus on this other thing first, or that kind of thing. But this process of having the goals, having the check-ins, all that sort of stuff just helps to keep you on track and helps to really highlight where you're not taking action, can help to highlight the thoughts that are helping you not take action. Not that they're being that helpful in that situation, but you know, that lead to you not taking action. And it just usually feels more pleasant than the judgment and shame we put ourselves when we don't achieve our goals, right? By like, you know, sometimes we distract ourselves with the other things. So yeah, that's where that can feel more pleasant by distracting ourselves, but then ultimately we're not actually getting to our goals. So the other value is that it gives your brain evidence that you can do hard things, right? So that you can do brave things, that you can achieve your dreams, that you can handle failure, right? That you can handle things not working out as you planned, right? and it makes it easier to take action, right? Especially as you start training your brain into more useful thoughts and beliefs, because it's easier to take action from those new thoughts and beliefs, right? Much like I said, the whole, what if it's possible that we can create content? Then, okay, right, it's easier for us to take action from there. So I have already told you a bit about the Bravery Board masterclasses that are happening at the end of June, right? So this is the place to learn this whole process for free, right? And we can come together as a group, and we're in the Facebook group, the Business Bravery with Tiff Facebook group, and also like in a group over Zoom for the sessions. I may or may not live stream it through to Facebook. We will see, depending on technology. So, but either way, the recordings will be up in Facebook, right? So I'll be teaching this over 3 days, and from the 24th, the 25th, the 26th in the US time zone, and it will be, I forgot to write down the time. I think it's 5 p.m. US Eastern is usually where I put what time I usually put these on. But double check the landing page just in case, because I'm recording this ahead of time, so I may change that. So together we visualize, we set brave goals for the next quarter, for July, August, and September, and we plan out the next quarter, right? We work through the thoughts that are holding you back, and we reframe them so that you can take more actions through the quarter. And you will learn about this repeatable process and being able to check in and all of that stuff as well. So as part of it, we look at shifting your identity and really connecting you with your future self. And, together we connect and support each other through the process, right? And through this process, we put it all into a vision board for the next quarter. If that is your choice, if you don't want to, you can just do all of the planning and all of that stuff, right? So we tap in together into the possibilities and the manifestation, and it's very, very awesome. In December, we had one participant who went from like, I can't sell, to running a masterclass the very next week, right? And in March, we had some similar shifts, especially with those people who took me up on the Bravery booster calls, the one-on-one 60-minute calls as well. So similar shifts to, oh, okay, wow, yeah, oh yeah, I'm meant to be a coach, yeah, and just not letting other people's negative comments hold them back from stepping into their biggest, bravest self, right? So day one is going to be about brave goal setting, right? And the difference between brave and smart goals, why be brave, and some of that stuff. Day two is going to be the brave goals and actual planning and doing that kind of thing. And part of the power of doing this over the 3 days is one, shorter sessions, but also time to think about things and dream in between. And I think that can be really valuable. Plus, we get some time to kind of just do this over the 3 days. But for those people who perhaps don't want to do it that way and would rather sit down for, and watch a 60-minute recording and work through it on their own, that will be available too. So day two is doing the planning, and we'll be doing the thoughts and the reframing. Day three is brave goals and getting more done. And so this is where I'm going to be talking to you about the check-in process, and we'll also be doing some live coaching as well for those people who want to opt in. And that day three may be a longer session, maybe, but again, we'll play that by ear. As I said, I'm planning this, I'm recording this ahead of time, so we will see. But book in to sign up to be a part of this. Go to my Instagram bio. There will be a link by the time this podcast comes out. Or definitely join the Facebook group, Business Bravery with Tiff. There'll be a link to that in the show notes and all that stuff. And yeah, just come and find me over on Instagram at Tiffany G Studios, TIFFANY, G for golf, STUDIOS on Instagram, so that you can get all the details, links to groups, booking link, all of that good stuff. So, just a very quick recap from what I've talked about so far is just to the point of today's episode, the key takeaways was just spotting the negative thoughts and understanding your own patterns with thoughts and procrastination and how to work through situations. Hang on a minute. Let me just scroll back up. Sorry, guys. Okay, the key takeaways. It was spotting sneaky sabotages that seem reasonable but are actually holding you back. How to reframe negative thinking so you can take bolder, braver action in your coaching business. What are brave goals? And I did talk about those a little bit and why I prefer them over SMART goals. And I teach that whole process in the masterclasses. And then how the Bravery Board, like vision and planning process works. And yeah, to help you sign more clients. And I talked about that situation with you're going to create content and then suddenly you find yourself doing this other thing and doing the other thing, and just the whole procrastination, overwhelm, uncertainty, and how all that comes in. So if you're listening to this and you want some help and you don't want to wait for masterclasses and you're like, Tiff, I need 60 minutes with you. I want help and I want your 10 years of online marketing experience and I want help just unraveling these webs of worry that are in my brain so that I can move forward. Book in for a Bravery Booster call. Get in touch with me. Find me on Instagram at Tiffany G Studios and book in for one of those. It will definitely help you and you won't have to wait until June. Or join us in June or do both or sign up to be a client with me. Whatever, if you want that sort of help. But otherwise, let me know what you thought of this episode, if you resonated with the things in this episode. And thank you so much for listening. That's it from me. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Business Bravery podcast. Has this episode inspired you to do something brave? Even if it's only send a difficult email, please share it with me on Instagram or other social media channels. Feel free to tag me at Tiffany G Studios. That's TIFFANY. G for golf, STUDIOS, no spaces, no underscores, etc. Or you can use the hashtag Business Bravery Podcast so that I can cheer you on and together we can inspire other coaches and course creators to do brave things in their business and life. Now, I'm Tiffany and I'll leave you with this one last thing. What's one brave thing you're going to do today? It doesn't have to be big. Even the smallest steps can create the most massive results. So again, feel free to share it with me either publicly or privately so that I can cheer you on. That's it from me. Until next time, bye for now.